Ditch, news and comment from Ireland on theditch.com. I'm Harry Browne.
And I'm Niamh Bhriain, and you can follow the party line, spread the party line, share the party line, and make sure you get on the Ditch WhatsApp feed at ontheditch.com. Today we're joined by Eoghan McNeill from The Ditch, so welcome Eoghan.
Thanks for having me.
How's it going on? Good to see you. And look, if you in the audience are old enough to remember a time when RTÉ programs used to be better, more inclusive, more challenging, more interesting, there's a pretty fair chance you're remembering shows that our guest worked on. We're joined today, and very pleased to be joined today, by Betty Purcell, formerly an RTÉ producer, also a member of the RTÉ Authority in her day, presently a media coordinator for the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign. She's also the author of a really great memoir about her time in the National Public Service broadcaster and about other things as well. It's a fabulous book, aptly called Inside RTE. Welcome, Betty.
Thanks,
Welcome, Betty.
Thank you.
But first we're going to start with Eoghan. So Eoghan, can you tell us what's in The Ditch this week?
Yeah, we've been the subject of a little bit of a campaign to have actually two of our stories taken down. This year we covered a guy called Alan Merriman, who is the former chief executive of a private equity fund called Elkstone, which invests funds on behalf of their wealthy clients. And one of their clients is a woman called Nicole Junkerman, who it's hard to say with absolute certainty and hard to use the right line. Like, we reported her as being someone who once told Jeffrey Epstein that she wanted to have a baby with him. So maybe an ex-girlfriend. Or
An associate, anyway.
an associate of Jeffrey
Okay.
Epstein.
Yeah, an acquaintance.
And Nicole Junkerman is a former client of Elkstone's, and Alan Merriman coordinated a deal involving her and Jeffrey Epstein. And they were investing in an Israeli company that was backed by Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel and close Epstein associate.
Right.
And we covered this. And
Some time ago.
That was back
yeah,
in
it was
February?
it was like early-ish this
Early
year.
this year.
And Alan Merriman stepped down after the story. And then, a couple of weeks ago, we got this notification from Google that our reporting had been taken down.
Taken down as in from the Google
Taken
listings.
out of Google search listings. And then when we queried it again, it turned out that somebody somewhere had copied and pasted our story into a blog on Tumblr, and then they backdated it to make it seem that it was published a day before us, and then said that we were infringing on this Tumblr user's copyright.
Oh, okay, so that you had essentially stolen the story.
Yeah.
So you guys were set up with Google to make it look like you had taken a story from somebody else.
Somebody, and it is unclear who has who set up that blog and copied and pasted our story, and we're not suggesting anything.
No, of course, but a very strange thing to do, because you would get a notice from Google telling you that that was happening, and therefore you would be in a position to contest that, which you obviously did.
Yeah.
And the story has been restored?
It has been restored. We got a report from someone about something similar has gone on with the Business Post's reporting on other Elkstone matters.
Okay.
Some posts have been deleted and taken down about negative stories about Elkstone.
Okay.
But, one thing in all of this, funny thing about it all is that, as I said, Alan Merriman stepped down as chief executive just after we had published a couple of stories on the services that he provided for Nicole Junkerman. He would have facilitated her she was a big investor in a housing estate in Dublin, actually.
Is she based in Dublin?
No, she's based abroad. I think she's based in the US.
He's based in Dublin. Alan,
Merriman is,
he's based in Dublin.
Yeah.
But Nicole is based somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's a fun little exercise if you Google Elkstone and Nicole Junkerman for years, and the Business Post was the main offender of this. They would have covered Elkstone quite a bit, and they would have always said, Elkstone, who manages wealth on behalf of wealthy clients, whose clients include Nicole Junkerman. Nicole Junkerman was always there. Suddenly now, they don't mention Nicole Junkerman.
Right.
Like when Alan Merriman was stepping down, it was, Alan Merriman has decided to step down. And he discussed this with the team in January and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
It doesn't say, and some of their clients include Nicole Junkerman.
Could I go back and just look at this targeting of the ditch again? Is there any indication that the kind of temporary disruption to the searchability of the stories that this created, is there any indication that that has a kind of an ongoing effect? So, Google notified you, you were able to prove to Google that you hadn't stolen the story from somewhere else. Google restores the story. But does that break, if you like, in the story searchability? Does that disrupt its algorithmic strength at some point?
It's a good question. And, with all this kind of stuff, I like to be a little bit self-aware about all the things I don't know about SEO and algorithms, and I'm always inherently skeptical of someone who tells you this is how the algorithm works, and it's like, really? And then it changes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you can spend your whole life trying to second guess these things. I'm not sure is
the answer. Yeah, no, that's a perfectly fair answer to that. It just getting at why someone would do a disruption like that. You would sort of think it was hardly for the 3 days that you were actually delisted. You think they must think that there's some deeper effect that they're having.
Yeah. Well, that person could have thought that they would have got away with it as well. Like when you
that Google would be ignored
in
some way.
When you Google some of these terms, it is like some of the names involved. When you Google them, it's one of the first.
I'll bet it is.
One of the first search results, because actually that is one thing I do know about SEO, is that the best way to have a good SEO policy is to publish things that people want to read. So a lot of people want to read about Jeffrey Epstein's adjacency to, I should say, Elkstone did tell us when we were doing the story that they have no relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. So that is what... So that is what Elkstone would say, but certainly our coverage was about how their former chief executive did coordinate a deal involving Jeffrey Epstein.
Very good.
And just on the blog, is it, if I remember correctly, Tumblr was the blog, and then it had, was it no followers, no likes, no subscribers?
No profile.
No profile, nothing. So it was just created for this purpose.
Yeah.
And it was traced to Spain, I think you said. But
somebody somewhere going, fuck, what are we going to do? We set up a Tumblr blog and we get on to Google.
It's quite a story. We'll have, obviously, a link in the show notes to the Ditch story, because it is it's an insight.
It raises more questions than answers. Like,
does in a way,
who's behind it, why, what are, all of that stuff. Who knows? Maybe there'll be another story following on from
it
this.
shows to me that you're annoying people, and that's a really good sign. It kind of makes me think back to the really old days, Hibernia and Village in its early years. Financial stories were very often the cutting edge of really irritating the powers that be. So it's a good sign that somebody got mobilised to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Very good point. So look, we're going to move on to our non-ditch media of the week. The NDM this week is, in Betty's honour, a story about RTÉ that ran in the Irish Independent last weekend. It was a report card for RTÉ, looking at RTÉ's performance across a number of elements of the organization. So in sport, in news and current affairs, in light entertainment, in podcasts, in the RTÉ player, etc. It's like a 5-author piece in the Indo. John Maher, Adrian Weckler, Dara McManus, Anne-Marie Hourihan, Aoife Rooney, and John Smith are the co-authors of this piece. And what's striking about this, I thought, Betty, was that it's actually kind of reasonably nice to RTÉ in an environment where the media, the print media, is usually kind of hostile. This is a piece saying, well, RTÉ is mostly doing 7s and 8s in all of these areas.
I mean, it may be the kind of time of year that, sometimes journalism at this time of year creates kind of fluffier copy, beach read copy, that we won't be too hard on, calling Miriam hard hitting is maybe a little kind at this stage because
Prime time continues to hold power to account with Miriam O'Callaghan, says the Indian.
I mean, it's very kind to RTÉ. It's right about RTÉ Investigates. They've done some amazing work. And even where it's a bit kind of cool on some of the presenters, it's kind of wrapped up in a fairly friendly way. It's definitely a friendly read for RTÉ, and as you say, most of the marks are 7 or 8 out of 10, which is not a bad innings.
No, it's not. And that it is fair to say that the print media is often hostile to RTÉ, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there was historically that tension over advertising apart from anything else, and competition about advertising. So the Independent would have been hostile. But then, of course, they co-opted the most hostile of all, Brendan O'Connor, into the building, which maybe was a clever idea because he certainly lost a lot of his anger, and he plays by the rules. And he's building audiences for RTÉ, so
very diverse guests as well.
I mean,
well, indeed, that was one point that I was going to make.
We'll go on and make it.
Go on. His panels are to I won't say the right of Genghis Khan, but they are often to the right of the government. Yeah. Which is the really salient point. And,
That's
he's
very critical of Genghis Khan, I think.
Yeah, it's probably unfair to Genghis Khan. But, he has a few regulars.
Yes.
Whenever there's an economic subject, it's going to be Dan O'Brien. Whenever there's an EU or neutrality subject, it's going to be Bridget Laffan. Mm-hmm. Whenever it's an issue to do with social issues, sexuality, it's either Brenda Power or David Quinn. Mm-hmm. And they are so regular that, I'm sure their payments must be done on a monthly basis, like semi-staff, because it's kind of ridiculous. I actually wrote to Brendan O'Connor a few weeks back, and I just said, honestly, Brendan, because your show is listened to by a lot of people. But do you ever think when you're setting up the panels, is there anyone on here to represent the 1 million people who voted for Catherine Connolly? Mm-hmm. Because very often that's the question I ask at 11:04 on a Sunday. And I say, not one. Occasionally, Oisin Coughlin is there and does a fairly okay job. But, it's a question that producers and panel makers have to ask. If you're cutting out literally half the listening population.
And did you get a response
and skewing
to that?
against it? None yet.
No response. Okay.
We'll let you know.
Okay. No, but I mean, we've discussed, I think, not on this show, but I often discuss it in different circles, in particular the Brendan O'Connor panels, and it's a horrific. Every week it's just horrendous. Like, they're rolled out as though they are the experts on a particular topic, and there's often there's information it's objectively speaking it's wrong, particularly on the triple lock, and we'll probably get into that. On the European Union, it's impossible to be in any way critical and get any airtime. For example, like you said, it's Bridget Laffan. It's it's the same people are rolled out again and again and again, and it's actively excluding people that are of a certain opinion, as though they don't matter. But then even around the Catherine Connolly presidential campaign, the campaigns or the panels that were rolled out then, wouldn't have been in favour of her, for example. Or, I remember the Brendan O'Connor show on the Saturday or the Sunday after she had been elected. And it was almost like, how's he going to deal with this? How is Brendan going to deal with the fact that the vast majority of people, over 1 million people, like you said, have voted for somebody that his show actively dislikes and has people on to discredit?
He had Breed Smith on recently-ish, didn't he? Who was, very much
Yep.
an outlier as far as his regular guests go. And as a result of how irregular someone like Breed is, I remember...
I think that was the week after I wrote them,
Was
funnily
it?
enough.
Right. Well, maybe this is the reason why.
Funnily
There you
enough.
go.
But I mean, and Dan O'Brien was on that weekend as well, and he was quite... Dan was almost taken aback at having someone who disagreed with him on, and was kind of up on his high horse about how Breach challenged him, and almost seemed to think that he was being attacked. It's this is
A difference
this
of
is what
opinion. Oh my
usually
God, that
happens.
does not usually happen here. Yes,
Yeah, that was very notable. Yeah.
There's one low mark in this, a 5, the lowest mark that any area gets, and that is for prestige programming. And interestingly, Anne-Marie Eoghan is the one who gives it a 5, saying that maybe it's a question of what's not on RTÉ. There's little arts programming, few interesting documentaries, and not enough commitment to comedy. And this from a country that sells itself on the international market as a hub of creativity. No wonder watching RTÉ has become such an uncomfortable experience, and one that more and more people are deciding not to have. And maybe that can be a kind of our segue into talking more generally about where RTÉ is today, Betty, and what is it that is it the case, first of all, that RTÉ watching and listening has become an uncomfortable experience, maybe for former producers and members of the authority?
I have to say Anne-Marie is pretty spot on there. I mean, arts programming has been almost phased out entirely in television, and the documentary unit has been abolished. Some really, really first-class producers and researchers now looking for homes within RTÉ and hoping that they're not sent somewhere awful. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous for a public service broadcaster where the documentary strands were key and arts documentaries were always popular. I mean, I remember doing a programme with Michael D, choosing and helping to present a programme on Ireland's favourite painting.
I remember that.
And the schedulers upstairs were saying, no one's going to watch that. Nearly 400,000. The same Mary Robinson, I did a documentary about Mary Robinson. Everyone said, well, it's part of our remit, we'll do it, but, no one will watch it. 370,000. Yeah. I mean, people will watch good content. They love it. Mm-hmm. The Maurice McCabe documentaries that went out from the doc unit, they were highly watched, some of the top ratings for that week. So it's not that there isn't a hunger, and Irish people are pretty serious viewers of content, and they like content. So the kind of dumbing down doesn't even always work in terms of building audiences.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's a public service broadcaster for? If people are going to turn to RTÉ, it's precisely for that sense that something important is going to be here, as well as something interesting, hopefully also entertaining. But that you go to the national broadcaster for that sense of occasion and that sense of importance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that's happened in a way, it's probably got to do with the dual funding model, has just been a difficulty for RTÉ, because on the one hand you have the public service remit, which is seen as governmental, going back to Sean Lemass and RTÉ being an instrument of public policy almost. And that part of it is an overhang from the Section 31 days, the sacking of the RTÉ Authority in 1972 over the McNeill interview. That brought a kind of self-censorship and a fear and a managerial censorship that I think in the latter times is still there.
Right. Section
It's a
31,
culture.
maybe
It's a
we should just do a
culture.
footnote for our younger listeners and
Indeed.
viewers. Section 31 was a part of the Broadcasting Act that allowed the minister to make an order that would prohibit interviews, in the particular case, interviews with members of certain organizations.
Exactly. most specifically at the time Sinn Féin, which were a small but growing organisation, very, very prominent in some areas, like in the inner city communities, in the communities against drugs. Certain stories you would automatically find that you were having to ask Sinn Féin the question, are you a member of Sinn Féin? Which was always difficult, and led to a number of us as journalists taking a case to the European Court of Human Rights on Section 31, saying that it was not enabling us to do our jobs properly and not allowing the public to have its fair amount of information. But that's a long time ago.
It's also,
but it's
of course,
still there.
It's still there, and of course, obviously affected the coverage of the troubles in the north, as well. So it was
Completely.
an obstruction to an understanding of a story that was fundamental to the entire island, not just to stories that were happening.
Oh,
in the south.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, mainly it was to do with censoring material coming from the north. And what it meant was that even in terms of an archive of public service broadcasting, we lack the voices of Sinn Féin and Republican nationalism in that period, because we didn't. Some of us tried to get permission to record, even though it wouldn't be put out under Section 31, but to just make the space to make an archive. And what happened was that when the peace process started, RTÉ was kind of on the back foot, because we didn't have the contacts, because we didn't, so all of that was all wrong and government policy. But to bring it to the present day, I think that what's happened is that RTÉ has found it convenient, because they're always having to go either on an annual basis, cap in hand, looking for a licence fee increase, or more lately on a multi-annual basis to try and get a big tranche of money every 3 years. So it kind of becomes part of the culture that you play nice with the government. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really embedded now in RTÉ. And it's seen on everything. There's very often, when you just listen, the kind of hostile questioning of people of the left, say. Mm-hmm. There's also kind of a sense that people, like you mentioned, the triple lock and neutrality, that people who hold a position contrary to the government position on this are somewhat eccentric and minority, mm-hmm. whereas in fact they're majority. Yeah. All the polling shows they're majority. But they're treated in RTÉ discussions as though they are some strange people who have this very, very tiny minority.
That's if they're given airtime at all.
That's if they're given airtime at all. And of course the whole narrative is created by the Bridget Laffans, the Ben Tonras, the Declan Power, mm-hmm. People like that who are quite well embedded with the industrial establishment and the EU view of where we should be going on neutrality.
Maybe just on, because you mentioned a little bit about the North and the peace process, and we had said we might touch a bit on partition. And I suppose one of the things is, if you watch RTÉ in the 26 counties, it's quite different to watching it in the 6 counties. Yeah. And it wasn't until I started going up to Belfast to visit my sister that I realised there's a lot of programmes that she can't get up there. For example, a lot of sports coverage that's different, and you'll just have a black screen that says RTÉ, but you won't actually see any content for a period of time if you're watching it live, or to watch stuff back on the player. You'll be told that you don't have the rights to do that. Up until maybe a year or so ago, maybe a bit more, she used to enter the competitions, RTÉ competitions. Now you can no longer enter competitions if you live in the 6 counties because of regulations, apparently. I think there was at one point a situation where Armagh were playing in the All-Ireland final, and people in Armagh couldn't enter a competition to win tickets to go to see Armagh playing. And it might seem like a minor thing, but it's reinforcing the idea that Ireland is a 26 county Ireland. It's partitioned. Whatever happens beyond Cavan and Monaghan is nothing to do with us. And it's kind of reinforcing. Even at one stage, I think it was maybe during the European elections, or I think it was during the European elections, that there was, on the debates, a map of Ireland that literally stopped at Cavan, Monaghan, like Leitrim, Donegal. There wasn't like as if the island kind of fell off then into the sea. So like with maps, with competitions, with content, it's RTÉ saying to the people here, we're not part of the people of the 6 counties. We're separate. We're partitioned, and it's embedding that partitionist logic. I don't know if you had...
Absolutely, and again, I think it's this point of kind of being close to the government view, which I mean, again, the government view is that what we are is a 26 county state, and really let's not ruffle that in the immediate future or even in the medium term future. When I was on the authority, one of the things that we tried to authorise was spending which was needed to boost the content of RTÉ into the 6 counties, which was actually a technical thing that needed to be done. And my understanding is that went along for a certain period and then was pulled for financial reasons. After I was no longer on the authority, in the next authority, that the technical build that was needed in order to give that accessibility that you're talking about. So in other words, that people north of the border are seen as second-class citizens in terms of RTÉ coverage, and it's quite outrageous what you're saying about things like the Armagh game. I know that there was a problem with those phone ovation, where you phone in, and there was always a Republic of Ireland phone number and a North of Ireland
and then
phone
it suddenly wasn't there any longer.
And then it was no longer. So I don't know what that is.
I saw that Sinn Féin had actually brought forward legislation, a bill. It's sitting in the Dáil. It hasn't advanced beyond the second stage, but it was to unify the regulations in the 6 counties and in the 26 counties, so that there would effectively be no border in terms of broadcasting. It was brought forward, I think, in 2024, and it hasn't advanced since. I think it was since last year. It's just kind of stalled. But that there was an initiative on the part of Sinn Féin, but it's gone nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, without government
backing, it's not going to
it's
go.
likely to sit there.
Yeah.
Betty, can I ask about the self-inflicted aspect of RTÉ's position? If RTÉ is on the back foot with the government and in relation to the likes of its relationship with ministers, etc. It's partly because RTÉ has been kind of seen as a national embarrassment to a certain extent, subject of a best-selling, scandal-ridden book by Shane Ross, and obviously it's to do with waste, it's to do with presenter salaries, it's to do with Toy Show the Musical. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that you can look at RTÉ and say, they made a mess of that, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's kind of, if you like, there's 2 RTÉs. There's the ordinary programme makers with their heads down, busy as bees, trying to be creative, strapped for cash, paid badly. Like most RTÉ staff earn between 45 and 60,000. The average salary on CSO is 53,000 in Dublin. So most ordinary programme makers aren't hugely well paid. But the commercial part of RTÉ, which drives more than 50% of the income of the organisation, has been given its autonomy and independence to, if you like, be a bit rogue and do its own thing. And that's where the Tubridy scandal came from, that they started using the commercial way of thinking, which is let's think of a way of giving Tubridy more money without him being seen as earning more than 500,000, which would be embarrassing as a story. So they used this barter account that had been used for helping out with entertainment of commercial people, big advertising executives, etc. So in a way, it's a disease that's coming in from that caused the whole Tubridy scandal, and then all the offshoots with the questions in the Oireachtas are about flip-flops and buses to Croke Park and big meals out and flying to Japan for the World Cup and all that sort of thing that were highly embarrassing for RTÉ. But I mean, in a way, I am a defender of RTÉ because I'm a defender of programme makers, and I would like to see a proper funding model that was free of government interference, but was regularly looking at the needs of a broadcaster in order to stay alive and still make decent programming. And that can only be done, I think, with Exchequer funding, but one that is a step away from the government control thing of, will Catherine Martin be nice to us and give us a 3-year funding dollop? Because that is bound to conservatise an organisation when it comes to the news and current affairs end. To feel, well, we have the minister in, and guess what? He's going to be deciding on our future in a month's time.
Exactly.
So it's just impossible to do that without taking that issue of exchequer broadcasting, and it's not popular politically.
No, I mean,
I've got to say, I'm with you on that commercial side of things, because obviously, when the whole Tubridy thing broke, and it was months of headlines and all the rest, and have my own political criticisms of RTÉ. But I've got to say, one thing that really grated with me around that time was commentators from Virgin Media or from the Irish Independent who they were absolutely loving it, right? And they were taking this opportunity to really to go and stick the boot into RTÉ, missing the fact that the actual bad parts of RTÉ are caused by the profit motive, the corporate side of RTÉ, which is what your organisation is completely run by. We don't have that same level of transparency around Virgin Media or around Media Huis, and it's
which owns the Irish Independent,
and its executive that had to resign over that. He got AI brain and had to, so all of and it is. I remember that summer. I think afterwards, I did. Some secondary school student had got in touch about their politics and society module, and they were doing a case study on The Ditch, and they had questions about what I thought about RTÉ, and and I remember we did a presentation for her class, and even her teacher was asking me about what do you think about RTÉ funding, and I remember him kind of thinking that. Well, I thought that he wasn't expecting me to say what I said, where I was saying, yes, absolutely keep funding RTÉ, because at a bare minimum, it's a really good thing to have a public service broadcaster like that in a sea of broadcasters run to the same principles that caused all of that bad shit in RTÉ to begin with.
Spot on. I don't disagree with one bit of that, and I think that is the kind of strategic issue that RTÉ needs to address. It can't do it on its own. It can't do it without some political backing for a shift towards exchequer funding.
The Future Media Commission did recommend,
yes,
of course,
they did.
that shift, and that was the one recommendation that the government rejected.
Yeah.
Now, do you think the government likes having RTÉ on a string?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So let's dwell with that for a second.
For a while.
So the Future Media Commission has this recommendation that would essentially take RTÉ away from the kind of, first of all, from the kind of desperate year to year, we're stuck and dependent on a license fee that's dwindling. And it's the one recommendation that the government rejects, and therefore RTÉ continues to have this, cap in hand relationship to the government. Works well from a government standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it is really I think it's really noticeable, and I think it's gotten much more noticeable. I mean, our view when I was a programme maker was very much to, to have balance thing. But it was, like two government, two anti-government, two opposition, or one government, one opposition, and two neutrals who were genuinely neutral. Like journalists, or if you had a left-wing commentator, you had a right-wing commentator, or whatever. But never two right-wing commentators, the government, and one person from the opposition basically being beaten up in the corner. So now you've got this. It's a shift. I think it's a culture, and I think it's almost in the organisation in the same way that there was the fear on Section 31. I think there is now the fear of really offending government, and I think that is everywhere in the organisation. I mean, you will see it in terms of Palestine, where the RTÉ coverage has very much kind of tracked very close to the government position. I mean, it has also done outrageous things because it is fed by Reuters and AFP. That's who controls what's said on RTÉ very often.
Because that's where the text comes from, that's where the footage comes from, etc. So a lot of global coverage is essentially in the hands, as you say, of these international agencies that tend to run to a Western agenda.
Absolutely. And, I mean, I was just looking there the other day, and it's quite interesting that in the very early days when Israel was creating the space for the genocide that they had planned at that stage, on the 12th of October 2023, RTÉ had a headline that says Hamas beheaded babies pictures show. And that was a Reuters report. It was covered everywhere. I mean, afterwards, Spanish television apologised for having published it. They published it too. But it was Netanyahu showed these secret pictures to Anthony Blinken, which apparently were charred bodies of babies, babies in body bags, etc. There was no use of the word alleged. Since then, this whole story has been completely discredited. But at the time, RTÉ, our public service broadcaster in Ireland, where people feel very strongly pro-Palestine, cover that in that way. And again, in that early period when the whole thing was being set up, the constant need for Israeli spokespeople, taking the Israeli view of a story, the issue of saying civilian deaths were likely Hamas terrorists, that the bombing of a hospital was because Israel says Hamas has a control centre in there. These kind of things were the narrative creation. And I think that that's what's so sad, because it's handing that control away to organisations that are supranational and that, as you say, have very much the Western view. They also operate, by the way, under the Israeli military
censorship regime.
So everything that they put out from Israel is seen by the military and vetted by them.
Of course, that's true when an RTÉ reporter goes out to Israel as well.
It is.
So when we had RTÉ reporters on the ground in Tel Aviv, they were
always
essentially
in Tel
running.
Aviv. Yes. But I mean, if you look at the creative way that an organisation like Channel 4 managed to, they were also stuck outside. They couldn't get into Gaza because Israel made sure of that no one got into Gaza. But they used Palestinian journalists. They feature them. Secundar Kermani did fantastic work at, helping them, obviously, to make their reports more sophisticated, more palatable to a Western audience. I don't know whether he colorized, etc. But for what was done on very basic technology within Gaza, he was able to put out regular stories night after night that show the situation in there. And that's why Israel didn't get away with it, actually.
Maybe just as well on that, like there were often times where I was usually following stuff on Al Jazeera, and you'd see something on Al Jazeera like, I don't know, the most horrific massacre where hundreds of people may have been killed in one incident, and then you turn on RTÉ News and it's not even featured.
Yeah.
Like it's not even a story. So, I wonder, how is that decision made where you have, like even with what's been going on in Lebanon the last while, a lot of it'll maybe be 1 or 2 days of coverage and then it's gone. Whereas
Absolutely.
you'll be, headline news, like often you would get the headline from RTE is that there was a missile or a drone attack in Kiev, for example, and 2 or 3 people were killed. Any killing is horrific, of course, but you have headline news of 2 or 3 people being killed in Kiev versus hundreds probably of people being killed in Gaza, and that doesn't feature as a story. So how is that kind of,
Absolutely.
who makes that editorial decision?
Well, there are news editors that are making those decisions, but they're making it in a context of having a feeling of what the Irish government EU position is on this. And any coverage of Ukraine is welcome and should be done. But it's much easier to get stuff done on Ukraine if you're in there. I mean, I know that, because we do the marches all the time and some of them have been huge. We've had regularly 100,000 people on the street.
This is the IPSC we're talking
This is the
about.
IPSC, sorry.
New hat on.
RTÉ
yes.
hat, yeah. But, constantly 60, 70,000 people on the street. And sometimes they're covered, sometimes they're not. It's a sporadic thing. I mean, if it was 60,000 people campaigning about farm prices or petrol prices, it would definitely be covered. But the feeling was, and speaking to some of my former colleagues, they would say, because it's so regular, because the regular big marches, they're not newsworthy. Whereas, maybe somebody does an artistic thing, stands looking like Liberty with blood pouring down or something. People say, oh, well, that might get coverage.
Pictures or whatever.
Pictures, there might be only 20 people doing a small action, an artistic kind of an action, and that'll get covered. But 70, 80,000 people might or might not get covered.
So look,
this is frustrating.
It's an interesting position you're in because you know how RTE works probably as well as anyone in the country knows, right? And you also have this role of trying to not only obviously get coverage for demonstrations that the IPSC organizes, but presumably trying to have some influence on the way that the larger story is covered, the story of Palestine is covered in that role. How does that play out, both in relation to RT and maybe in relation to other media? What are the kind of points of resistance that you come across from that role?
Well, both the newspapers. I mean, sometimes we get stuff in terms of letters, etc., in newspapers. So they're also kind of in the same camp of being careful to not offend the government. But in RTE, I think that, I don't think that anyone from the IPSC, as an IPSC representative, being the organisation that is in touch with Palestinian civil society, that works on international boycott, that does all of the big campaigns, be they on sport, be they on Eurovision, to have a sit-down interview with any member of the IPSC in the last 3 years, I don't think it has happened once.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Which is quite outrageous.
I remember she was very good in difficult circumstances. Like, wasn't Zoe on with LBC?
Oh, yes.
Around the time, so like,
to do it over there.
The Brits
Yeah, yeah.
are coming to look for you guys, but not
yes,
the Irish.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I mean, a lot of us have been on Al Jazeera.
yeah.
Zoe is on Al Jazeera quite a lot. You know, so I think that people are making their choices. Like you said, if you want to get the full story, you will turn to Al Jazeera, you will turn to Channel 4. And RTÉ very often has almost sounds as if the coverage that it's doing is for this part of this island, you know, stories about the weather and be careful of sunstroke and all of that, you know, welcome public service announcements. But really, for instance, since the Gaza so-called ceasefire, 1,200 people have been killed, a lot of children have been killed. It just doesn't feature anymore. It doesn't feature.
Just because you mentioned sit-down interviews, I think we all remember when the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, was here, and her interview on Morning Ireland with, I think it was Gavin Jennings, but maybe we can check that it was Gavin Jennings, I think, and how she was treated. I mean, she's an international lawyer with decades of experience. A UN, you know, expert who has come to Ireland. She wasn't received by the government. She was received by former President Michael D. Higgins. She was brought on Morning Ireland and she was treated, it was an absolute disgrace. I mean, you could hear Gavin Jennings huffing and puffing into the microphone as she's trying to defend herself. And he is quoting Zionist organisations as though they are as if they're the authority. And she's, you know, some troublemaker that, you know, we have to give her airtime, but we'd prefer she wasn't here. I don't know if...
Absolutely. And again, I think that's the thing of dovetailing with the government. The government gave the little message there by not meeting her.
Yes.
You know, and therefore she is a troublemaker and an eccentric. And as you say, such a significant and important person. Whereas the politeness, the kindness to the likes of Mark Regev when he's interviewed. No, it is really a problem when you get Israeli spokespeople who are proven to be telling lies a lot of the time, treated as though they are the oracle of truth. And all of the organisations from Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the United Nations, UNICEF, are treated as somehow outliers who have to prove their worth. And that is, again, a great shame.
It was the same when Professor Jeffrey Sachs was here. He was also, when he was...
Also true.
The same thing
David
that...
McCullough,
David McCullough, and I think he was on... Was he on the RTÉ News as well, I think? And he was absolutely brilliant, as he always is. But it was like, we cannot allow this version of events to be on RTÉ. That would, you know?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Sachs is a funny one where he's quite similar to Aaron Mattei, where a couple of years ago there was a decision made somewhere that Aaron Mattei is not good.
Beyond the pale.
He is beyond the pale, right?
Yeah.
And that's happened with Jeffrey Sachs as well. To be clear, like, you don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist when you talk in these terms, but there was a non-verbal but collective decision made in editorial newsrooms across the world that Jeffrey Sachs not good, and he's over here to see Catherine Connolly, not good. So David McCullough is going to get on, he's going to get on one, and he's going to show us. I think it said it in that piece that, what is it? His powers of holding people to account are lost now in his new role. But he, in that role with Jeffrey Sachs, he knows what he's supposed to do right there.
Yeah.
I think, can I just ask, the Irish government, in the eyes of the rest of the world, the Irish government doesn't have the same line on Palestine as, for instance, the EU does.
True.
Or as the US does. But yet it seems that RTÉ errs on the side of caution in relation to these things, that in effect, RTÉ is to the right of the Irish government, even on Palestine.
I think that's absolutely the case. I think that it errs on the side of caution. This is, again, the Section 31 overhang. Let's be super careful here. I mean, I remember myself doing a documentary on the West Bank, and we had Mary Robinson actually out there visiting people near Bethlehem in one of the refugee camps. But I mean, that was at that time way before October 7th. The view was we should really get a view from the Israeli embassy. We should check what their take would be on this. So it is an abundance of caution from management. And I have to say, of course, the view of programme makers and news editors has shifted. I mean, they are not impervious to seeing what has actually happened. So in the early days, they were much more genteel with the Israeli position. I think of recent, with some exceptions, like that particular treatment of Francesca Albanese was absolutely outrageous. What has happened since is people recognise because they see on their own phones. And, I have got to take my hat off to social media. People talk about how dreadful it is. If it wasn't for that, Israel would have managed to get away with suppressing all truth about the genocide. So the social media and the brave correspondents who tried their best to make coverage have permeated even into the RTÉ newsroom and RTÉ programmes. The bigger difficulty now, I think, is people know that it's awful and it's horrible, and they recognise that, but it's more that it's no longer a story. There's been a ceasefire there, and the killing is not so huge, and there's other things going on. There's tsunamis, there's heat waves, there's Ukraine continues, and we have other things to do. I think that can be as well a kind of laziness, a kind of thing of, there were 12 killed in Gaza on Friday, including that horrific attack on a funeral, people who were at a funeral. I mean, how could that not be newsworthy? But somehow it's not. And it's kind of not on the main news. Occasionally you'll get it on drive time. Drive time have been quite good. Occasionally you'll get a piece on the 1 o'clock news where the humanitarian situation demands that, James Elder or somebody will tell the real situation of what is going on. So it does get through, and Irish people are very well aware, and I would not like to give the impression that RTÉ is absolutely covering nothing, but it just could do better and could do more. That's all.
Maybe just two things that I had in my notes that I haven't mentioned that maybe you can just touch on a little bit. The piece that we looked at from The Independent, it completely ignored the fact that there is TG Cachar, an Irish language channel, and it also ignored Radio na Gaeltachta, an Irish language radio station. So, and it also said on Lyric FM that it's ignored by almost everyone. That was it's a direct quote, but I actually love Lyric FM. So I wonder if you can say a little bit about the Irish. I'm not sure if you were there when TG Cachar was started.
I was literally on the Authority when TG Cachar was set up.
Yeah.
One of Michael D's great things that he championed and pushed through and insisted on, and insisted on money being made available for it to become a viable entity. And the management view was, I won't say hostile, but reluctant to the whole enterprise. But once it got up on its feet, and of course RTÉ had to give cash but also free news into the fledgling station, and but it's also still being seen as out there and apart, a bit like the partition issue. It's kind of something separate.
And does that allow TG Cachar to have a certain freedom?
Yeah,
with
I
what
think
it does?
TG Cachar has generally been much better news coverage. Nocht coverage is good.
Yeah, it's really good.
I mean, they have good content, haven't
Yeah.
They have good documentaries. Their films are always watchable.
Yeah,
You
some of
know,
the best
so-
content is from
Yeah, so
Ginger
on a very small budget, they have managed to make an identity and to produce a credible product. So they are a very good example of what RTÉ could do better.
Yeah.
Again, there was a lot of kind of young people came in, probably some of your students, Harry, came in and, they had the vim of youth, the enthusiasm of youth, which, I mean, RTÉ itself was once a young station in 1960 when it was doing all its really inventive stuff, when the days when the Late was set up. Was in those days when it was really risky to have John Feeney on, or women talking about what they wore on their wedding night. It was risky, it was fun, and it was challenging the powers that be, which at that time was very largely the Catholic Church. But since then, there's become a kind of a jaded thing, and they're holding on to the presenters issue, which was commercially driven. We can't let any of our presenters leave the building because that would be a catastrophe.
At any cost.
At
Yeah.
any cost. And that became a management belief that was just completely unfounded, because when you think of it, the fear of losing Tubridy was why this whole thing was done with the barter account. And then when Tubridy left, Patrick Keelty came along, and there was no real change in the ratings for the Late Late Show. Again, in the morning schedule, there's been some small drop in the audience there, but I mean, there's still 400,000, 290. A bleed of 10,000 in those kind of figures is not catastrophic. So it shows that the fear of losing the big names out of the building was just completely blown sky high and was completely unnecessary. Now we discover that really what's needed is braver programming, not the fear of change. The fear of change programming has gone on for too long. And I was there in the early days of Women Today, a great groundbreaking programme. But also Day by Day was new then as well. And Pat Kenny was there, and people were doing things that were a little bit outrageous and a little bit frowned upon by government. And they were listened to for those reasons. So I think we need to get back to a bit more bravery. And if the mechanism to do that is exchequer funding, let's find a way to do that.
On that note, I think we're going to call it a podcast. We'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks a million, Betty. Thanks, Eoghan.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you
It's
all.
great to have you.
Thank you
Thanks.
all.